The night everything changed. Sarah Matthews stood before her bedroom mirror, carefully applying the final touches of mascara to her already perfect lashes. The coral pink dress her mother had helped her choose hung elegantly on her slender frame, and the tiara she'd worn as homecoming queen earlier that year caught the light from her vanity. Tonight was supposed to be the pinnacle of her high school career. At 17, Sarah had it all: captain of the cheerleading squad, straight-A student, and dating the quarterback of the football team, Michael Chen. But most importantly, she had just been crowned prom queen of Lincoln High School's class of 1992. The phone rang, interrupting her preparations. It was her best friend Jessica, calling from the school gymnasium where she was helping with last-minute decorations. "Sarah, you won't believe what I just overheard," Jessica whispered urgently into the phone. "Amanda Richardson was talking to some girls from her clique, and she said something about making sure you don't enjoy your fake crown tonight." She seemed really bitter about losing the prom queen vote. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Amanda Richardson had been her rival since middle school, competing for everything from student council positions to the attention of popular boys. When Sarah had been announced as prom queen the week before, Amanda's face had twisted with such rage that several teachers had to calm her down. The two girls had once been friends in elementary school, but jealousy and competition had driven a wedge between them that only seemed to grow deeper with each passing year. "Don't worry about Amanda," Sarah told Jessica, though she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her stomach. "She's probably just upset. We'll have an amazing night, and by Monday, she'll have moved on to something else to complain about." But even as she said the words, Sarah remembered the look in Amanda's eyes during the prom queen announcement. It wasn't just disappointment. It was pure hatred. Michael arrived at 7 sharp, looking handsome in his black tuxedo with a coral boutonniere that matched Sarah's dress perfectly. Her parents took dozens of photos on the front porch, her mother crying happy tears while her father struggled to hide his emotions.
"Have a wonderful time, sweetheart," her mother said, adjusting Sarah's tiara one last time.
"You look absolutely beautiful. This is a night you'll remember for the rest of your life." The gymnasium had been transformed into an underwater wonderland, complete with blue and green streamers, artificial coral, and twinkling lights that looked like stars beneath the sea. Sarah felt like a princess as she and Michael made their grand entrance, with everyone turning to admire the prom queen and her date. The photographer from the school newspaper snapped pictures, and underclassmen stared in awe at what they hoped to become in a few years. During the first slow dance, Sarah noticed Amanda standing alone by the punch table, wearing a burgundy dress that, while beautiful, seemed to pale in comparison to the attention Sarah was receiving. Amanda's date, a quiet boy from the chess club, looked uncomfortable as Amanda's eyes followed Sarah's every move across the dance floor. When their eyes met briefly, Amanda quickly looked away, but not before Sarah caught the flash of something dark and dangerous in her expression. The evening progressed beautifully. Sarah danced with Michael, posed for more pictures, and accepted congratulations from classmates and teachers alike. She even shared a friendly dance with David Martinez, the prom king, while Michael chatted with his football teammates. The DJ played all her favorite songs, and for a moment, Sarah felt like she was living in a fairy tale where nothing could go wrong. Around 10 o'clock, Sarah excused herself to visit the restroom and touch up her makeup. The hallway outside the gymnasium was dimly lit and quiet, a stark contrast to the loud music and laughter inside. She was walking back toward the dance when she heard footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw Amanda approaching, her face flushed and her hands trembling slightly. "Congratulations on your crown," Amanda said, though her voice carried no warmth. "You must feel so proud, getting everything you want as usual." Sarah tried to smile and diffuse the tension. "Amanda, there's no need for us to fight. We're graduating in a few weeks. Can't we just enjoy tonight?" But Amanda stepped closer, her eyes blazing with years of accumulated resentment. "Enjoy tonight? Do you know how long I've worked for this? How many committees I've served on? How many school events I've organized? But no, pretty little Sarah Matthews gets the crown because she's dating the quarterback and looks good in a cheerleading uniform." Sarah felt her heart racing as Amanda's voice grew louder and more aggressive. "Amanda, please, let's not do this here. We can talk on Monday if you want, but tonight should be fun for everyone." She tried to step around Amanda and return to the safety of the crowded gymnasium, but Amanda blocked her path. "You're not going anywhere," Amanda hissed, and Sarah saw something metallic glinting in Amanda's hand. Before she could fully process what was happening, Amanda raised her arm and Sarah felt a sharp, crushing pain across the left side of her head. The tiara flew off and clattered across the linoleum floor as Sarah stumbled backward, her vision blurring. The last thing Sarah remembered was the sound of her own voice calling out for help, though it seemed to echo from very far away. She saw Amanda's face twisted with shock at what she had just done, before everything went black. The prom queen's fairy tale had become a nightmare in the span of a few terrible seconds. In the gymnasium, Michael was looking around for Sarah, wondering why she had been gone so long. The dance was reaching its peak, and he wanted to be with his beautiful girlfriend for the crowning ceremony photos. He had no idea that in the hallway just outside, Sarah lay unconscious on the cold floor, her coral pink dress spread around her like flower petals, her life about to change in ways no one could imagine. The long sleep begins. Jessica Martinez was the first to find Sarah. She had noticed that the prom queen had been gone for nearly 20 minutes and decided to check on her friend. Walking down the dimly lit hallway, Jessica initially thought she was seeing a pile of coral fabric that had been dropped by one of the decorating committees. But as she moved closer, her scream pierced through the music from the gymnasium. "Help! Somebody help me!" Jessica's voice echoed through the corridor as she knelt beside Sarah's motionless body. Blood had pooled beneath Sarah's head, staining her beautiful dress and creating a stark contrast against the white linoleum floor. The prom queen's tiara lay several feet away, one of its fake diamonds cracked from the impact. Within seconds, teachers and students came running. Mrs. Henderson, the school nurse, immediately began checking Sarah's vital signs while Mr. Roberts, the principal, called for an ambulance. Michael pushed through the crowd, his face turning pale as he saw his girlfriend lying unconscious. "What happened to her?" "Sarah, can you hear me?" he called out, but Sarah remained completely still. Amanda Richardson had disappeared from the prom entirely. Several students mentioned seeing her leave through the back exit shortly after 10 o'clock, but in the chaos of finding Sarah, no one had connected her departure to the attack. The metal object Amanda had used turned out to be a heavy serving ladle from the refreshment table, which was found discarded in a nearby trash can. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes, but to everyone watching it felt like hours. Paramedics worked quickly to stabilize Sarah before rushing her to County General Hospital. Her parents received the devastating phone call at 10:47 p.m. while they were watching late-night television and expecting their daughter to return home with stories of magical prom memories. Dr. Elizabeth Warren was the attending physician in the emergency room that night. She had been working in trauma medicine for 15 years, but the sight of the young girl in the torn prom dress affected her deeply. Sarah had suffered severe blunt force trauma to the left temporal region of her skull, causing significant brain swelling and internal bleeding. The medical team worked through the night to relieve the pressure and stop the hemorrhaging. Mr. and Mrs. Matthews, Dr. Warren explained gently to Sarah's parents in the early morning hours, "Your daughter has sustained a serious traumatic brain injury. We've managed to stabilize her condition, but she's fallen into a coma. The next 24 hours are critical, and we'll know more about her prognosis once the swelling begins to reduce." Sarah's parents maintained a constant vigil beside her hospital bed. Her mother, Carol, held her daughter's hand and spoke to her continuously, believing that Sarah could hear her voice. Her father, Robert, contacted everyone he could think of, from the best neurologists in the state to ministers from their church. Friends and family members filled the waiting room, creating an impromptu support network that would sustain the Matthews family through the dark days ahead. The police investigation began immediately. Detective Maria Santos interviewed dozens of students and teachers, trying to piece together the events of that tragic prom night. Several witnesses mentioned seeing Amanda Richardson acting strangely throughout the evening, but Amanda had seemingly vanished after leaving the school. Her parents claimed she had come home upset around 11 o'clock and had locked herself in her room, refusing to speak to anyone. When Amanda was finally arrested 3 days later, the entire community was shocked. The quiet, academically successful girl had been driven to violence by jealousy and resentment that had been building for years. During questioning, Amanda broke down and confessed to hitting Sarah with the serving ladle, though she claimed she never intended to hurt her so severely. She had wanted to humiliate Sarah, to knock off her tiara and make her look foolish. But the blow had been much harder than she had planned. Michael visited Sarah every day after school, sitting beside her bed and reading aloud from her favorite books. He told her about graduation preparations, summer plans they had made together, and his acceptance to State University where they had both planned to attend. But as days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, Michael's visits became less frequent. The vivacious, laughing girl he had fallen in love with seemed to have disappeared, replaced by a silent figure surrounded by medical equipment. The doctors tried various treatments and medications, but Sarah showed no signs of improvement. Her brain activity remained minimal, and she required assistance with all basic functions. After 6 months, Dr. Warren had to have another difficult conversation with the Matthews family. "We've done everything medically possible," she explained. "Sarah is in what we call a persistent vegetative state. While she may survive for many years with proper care, the likelihood of her regaining consciousness is extremely small." The Matthews family faced an agonizing decision about long-term care. The hospital bills were mounting, and insurance would only cover a limited stay in the acute care facility. After much research and soul-searching, they found Peaceful Valley Extended Care Facility, a long-term care center about 30 miles outside of town that specialized in patients with severe brain injuries. Carol Matthews spent hours every day preparing Sarah for the move, carefully packing her daughter's belongings and decorating her new room with familiar photographs and mementos. The coral prom dress, carefully cleaned and mended, hung in the back of Sarah's closet at home, a painful reminder of the night that changed everything. At Peaceful Valley, Sarah became known as the Sleeping Beauty among the staff. Even in her unconscious state, she maintained an ethereal quality that reminded everyone of the vibrant teenager she had once been. Her parents visited every weekend without fail, celebrating birthdays and holidays beside her bed, always hoping that this would be the day their daughter would open her eyes and return to them. Amanda Richardson was sentenced to 5 years in prison for aggravated assault. She served 3 years before being released on parole, after which she moved to another state and changed her name. The guilt of what she had done haunted her every day, but she never had the courage to visit Sarah or reach out to the Matthews family to apologize. Years passed, and gradually, most people forgot about the prom queen who had never woken up from her long sleep. Her classmates graduated, went to college, started careers, got married, and began families of their own. But in room 237 at Peaceful Valley Extended Care Facility, time seemed to stand still, with Sarah Matthews locked in a world where 1992 would last forever. 3 decades of waiting. The world outside Sarah's quiet room at Peaceful Valley continued to spin and evolve while she remained frozen in time. Her parents, Carol and Robert Matthews, aged from vibrant middle-aged adults into seniors with gray hair and slower steps, but their devotion to their daughter never wavered. Every Saturday and Sunday they made the hour-long drive to sit beside Sarah's bed, updating her on family news, town gossip, and world events she couldn't comprehend. During the first decade, Carol brought magazines and read aloud about the Clinton presidency, the rise of the internet, and the excitement surrounding the approaching millennium. She described how their small town was changing, with new shopping centers being built and old landmarks being torn down. Robert would play Sarah's favorite music from high school on a small cassette player, hoping that familiar songs might somehow reach through the darkness of her unconscious mind. The staff at Peaceful Valley became like an extended family to the Matthews. Nurse Patricia Williams, who had been working there since Sarah's arrival, developed a special bond with the silent patient. She would brush Sarah's hair every morning, moisturize her skin, and speak to her as if she could respond. "Good morning, beautiful," Patricia would say each day. "Let's get you ready to see your parents this weekend. I know they're excited to tell you about your cousin's wedding." Dr. James Mitchell, the facility's neurologist, conducted regular evaluations of Sarah's condition. While her brain scans showed minimal activity, her body remained remarkably well preserved. Physical therapists moved her limbs daily to prevent muscle atrophy, and the dedicated care team ensured she maintained a healthy weight and avoided the infections that often plagued long-term coma patients. As the years progressed, technology in the medical field advanced dramatically. New scanning techniques and experimental treatments for brain injuries were developed, but none proved effective for Sarah's particular condition. The Matthews family spent thousands of dollars on consultations with specialists across the country, always hoping that somewhere, Someone would have a breakthrough treatment that could bring their daughter back to them. Michael Chen had graduated from State University and become a successful engineer. He married his college girlfriend, Jennifer, in 1998, and they had 3 children together, but he never completely forgot about Sarah. Every few years he would drive past Peaceful Valley and sometimes stop to visit, though seeing her unchanged condition filled him with profound sadness. During one visit in 2005, he brought his oldest son, explaining to the 8-year-old boy that this was someone very special from his father's past. The town of Lincoln had evolved significantly over the decades. The high school where Sarah had been prom queen was renovated twice, and most of the teachers who remembered her had retired. New generations of students walked the same hallways, completely unaware of the tragedy that had occurred there in 1992. The gymnasium where Sarah had danced on her last conscious night was eventually converted into a media center. Carol Matthews kept detailed journals throughout Sarah's coma, documenting every small change or hopeful sign she thought she observed. She wrote about times when Sarah seemed to be listening, when her breathing changed during familiar songs or when her eyes appeared to track movement in the room. Medical professionals gently explained that these were likely reflexive actions rather than conscious responses. But Carol refused to give up hope. The Matthews family endured their own series of challenges during Sarah's long sleep. Robert suffered a heart attack in 2007 but recovered after bypass surgery. Carol was diagnosed with arthritis that made the long drives to the facility increasingly difficult. Their other children, Sarah's younger siblings, grew up feeling like they lived in the shadow of their comatose sister, though they never complained about the attention and resources devoted to her care. Financial pressures mounted over the years. The cost of Sarah's care, even at the reasonably priced Peaceful Valley, consumed most of the family's savings. Robert worked extra years before retiring, and Carol took a part-time job to help cover expenses. Insurance companies periodically reviewed Sarah's case, threatening to reduce benefits for someone who showed no signs of improvement after so many years. In 2010, Dr. Mitchell presented the family with a difficult decision. Sarah had been in the coma for 18 years, and her condition remained unchanged. He suggested that they might want to consider discussing end-of-life options, explaining that many families in similar situations eventually chose to withdraw life support. The conversation devastated Carol, who became angry at the suggestion and insisted that as long as Sarah's heart was beating, there was still hope. Technology continued to advance around Sarah's still form. The facility upgraded its equipment multiple times, replacing the original machines that monitored her vital signs with newer, more sophisticated devices. Staff members began using tablets instead of paper charts, and the internet brought the world's information to the fingertips of anyone who wanted it. But Sarah remained disconnected from all these changes, existing in a bubble where time had no meaning. Patricia Williams retired in 2015 after working at Peaceful Valley for over 30 years. Her replacement, a young nurse named Marcus Thompson, was initially skeptical about the family's unwavering hope for Sarah's recovery. But over time, he too became invested in her story and began talking to her during his rounds, sharing news about his own life and asking her opinion on decisions, even though he never received responses. As Sarah's 30th anniversary in the coma approached, the Matthews family organized a small gathering in her room. Friends and relatives who remembered the vibrant teenager came to pay their respects and share memories. Jessica Martinez, now Jessica Rodriguez and a mother of 4, brought photos from their high school years and reminisced about shopping trips and sleepovers they had shared. The gathering was both celebratory and heartbreaking, as everyone present understood that they were essentially mourning someone who was still alive. Carol had aged into a woman in her 70s, her hair completely white and her movements careful and deliberate. Robert, now retired and dealing with his own health issues, struggled to hide his tears as he looked at his daughter, forever frozen at 17 years old. During that anniversary visit, Dr. Mitchell, now nearing his own retirement, conducted what he assumed would be another routine evaluation. He performed the standard tests, checking Sarah's reflexes and brain responses, not expecting anything different from the hundreds of previous examinations. But as he shone a small flashlight into Sarah's eyes to check her pupils, something unusual happened. For just a moment, so briefly that he almost dismissed it as his imagination, Dr. Mitchell thought he saw Sarah's eyes track the light. He repeated the test several times, and while he couldn't be completely certain, there seemed to be something different about her responses. After 30 years of complete unconsciousness, was it possible that something was finally stirring in Sarah Matthews's sleeping mind? The awakening Dr. Mitchell decided not to mention his observation about Sarah's eye movement to her parents immediately. After 30 years of false hopes and medical disappointments, he wanted to be absolutely certain before raising expectations that might be crushed once again. He began monitoring Sarah more closely, visiting her room multiple times each day to conduct subtle neurological assessments that wouldn't alert the family to his suspicions. Over the following weeks, Dr. Mitchell documented several small but potentially significant changes. Sarah's brainwave patterns, which had remained virtually flat for 3 decades, showed occasional spikes of activity during certain times of day. Her muscle tone seemed slightly improved, and her responses to stimuli appeared more consistent than they had been in previous years. Still, he cautioned himself against reading too much into these observations. Knowing how desperately he wanted to give the Matthews family good news, Marcus Thompson, Sarah's primary nurse, began to notice changes as well. During his morning routine of checking her vital signs and adjusting her position, he observed that Sarah's breathing patterns were different. Sometimes she seemed to be inhaling more deeply, as if she were trying to fill her lungs with more air. Her skin color also appeared healthier, with a faint pink flush that hadn't been present before. On a rainy Tuesday morning in March 2023, exactly 30 years and 7 months after her injury, Sarah Matthews began to stir. Marcus was in her room, quietly updating her charts, when he noticed her fingers moving slightly against the white hospital bedsheet. At first he thought it might be an involuntary muscle spasm, something that occasionally happened with long-term coma patients. But then Sarah's fingers moved again, and this time the movement seemed purposeful. Marcus immediately called for Dr. Mitchell, who arrived within minutes to find Sarah's eyes moving beneath her closed eyelids, as if she were experiencing REM sleep for the first time in decades. Her heart rate had increased slightly, and the monitors showed unusual brain activity patterns. Dr. Mitchell performed several responsiveness tests, gently touching Sarah's hand and speaking her name, but she remained unconscious. The medical team decided not to contact Sarah's parents until they had a better understanding of what was happening. They increased monitoring of her condition and brought in a specialist from the regional medical center to evaluate the situation. Dr. Amanda Foster, a neurologist with expertise in traumatic brain injuries, arrived that afternoon to conduct a comprehensive examination. Dr. Foster was amazed by Sarah's case. Having never encountered someone who had survived in a vegetative state for 3 decades, she ordered immediate brain scans and blood tests, wanting to understand what might be triggering these changes after so many years of inactivity. The results were encouraging but puzzling. Sarah's brain showed significantly more activity than previous scans, but her body remained unresponsive to external stimuli. On Thursday morning, Carol Matthews was preparing for her regular weekend visit when she received an unexpected phone call from Dr. Mitchell. His voice was carefully controlled as he explained that Sarah was showing some unusual neurological activity and suggested that she and Robert come to the facility as soon as possible. Carol's heart raced as she imagined both the best and worst possible scenarios. The drive to Peaceful Valley seemed to take forever, with Robert gripping the steering wheel tightly while Carol fidgeted nervously in the passenger seat. They had received similar calls before over the years, usually preceding discussions about Sarah's deteriorating condition or administrative changes at the facility. Neither dared to hope that this time might be different. When they arrived at Sarah's room, they found Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Foster waiting with expressions that Carol couldn't quite interpret. Sarah looked exactly the same as always, lying peacefully in her hospital bed with her graying brown hair spread across the pillow. But the atmosphere in the room felt different, charged with an energy that hadn't been present during their countless previous visits. Dr. Foster explained the recent observations and test results, emphasizing that while the changes were promising, they shouldn't expect dramatic improvements overnight. Brain injury recovery, especially after such an extended period, was typically a slow and unpredictable process. But as she spoke, something remarkable happened. Sarah's eyelids began to flutter. Carol gasped and reached for her daughter's hand, squeezing it gently while calling her name. "Sarah, sweetheart, it's Mom. Can you hear me?" We're here with you, honey. Dad and I are right here. For several tense moments, nothing happened, and Carol began to worry that she had imagined the eye movement. Then, slowly and with tremendous effort, Sarah Matthews opened her eyes for the first time in 31 years. Her gaze was unfocused and confused, darting around the room as if she were trying to understand where she was. When her eyes finally settled on her mother's face, Sarah's expression showed a flicker of recognition, though she seemed unable to comprehend what she was seeing. "Mom?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from decades of disuse. The single word sent shockwaves through everyone in the room, and Carol began crying tears of joy and disbelief. Robert, who had remained stoic through so many years of disappointment, broke down completely as he heard his daughter speak for the first time since 1992. Dr. Foster quickly began conducting neurological tests to assess Sarah's cognitive function and physical capabilities. Sarah could track objects with her eyes and respond to simple commands, but she appeared deeply confused about her surroundings. When asked what year it was, she answered 1992 without hesitation. When asked how old she was, she said 17 in the same confused whisper. The medical team realized they were facing a unique challenge. Sarah's consciousness appeared to be returning, but her mind remained locked in the time period before her injury. She had no memory of the past 31 years, no understanding of how much time had passed, and no comprehension of the dramatic changes that had occurred in her life and the world around her. Sarah's awakening created a media sensation that the Matthews family was completely unprepared to handle. Word spread quickly through the small medical community, and soon reporters were calling the facility requesting interviews about the woman who had awakened after 3 decades. The family requested privacy while Sarah underwent extensive medical evaluations, but the story proved too compelling for news outlets to ignore. Dr. Foster assembled a team of specialists to work with Sarah, including physical therapists, speech therapists, neurologists, and psychiatrists. Sarah's body had been maintained in relatively good condition, thanks to the dedicated care she had received, but her muscles were weak and her coordination was poor. Learning to walk, eat solid food, and perform basic tasks would require months of intensive rehabilitation. The psychological challenges proved even more complex than the physical ones. Sarah's mind remained convinced that she was 17 years old and had just attended her high school prom. She asked repeatedly about Michael, wondering why he wasn't visiting her in the hospital. She wanted to know about graduation plans and summer jobs, having no understanding that her classmates were now middle-aged adults with children and careers of their own. Carol and Robert struggled with how much information to share with their daughter. They wanted to protect her from the shocking reality of how much time had passed, but they also knew she would need to understand the truth eventually. For now, they focused on celebrating the miracle of her awakening, hoping that her mind would gradually accept the incredible changes that surrounded her new reality. A world transformed. The first few weeks of Sarah's awakening were filled with small victories and overwhelming challenges. Physical therapist Diana Rodriguez worked patiently with Sarah every day, helping her relearn basic movements that most people took for granted. Sarah's muscles had atrophied during her decades-long sleep, and simple tasks like sitting up in bed or holding a cup of water required tremendous effort and concentration. Speech therapist Karen Walsh was amazed by how quickly Sarah's voice grew stronger with practice. While her vocal cords had been affected by years of disuse, her ability to form words and express complex thoughts remained intact. However, Sarah's conversations were filled with references to people and events from 1992, creating constant reminders of the vast gap between her memories and reality. Dr. Foster decided to introduce Sarah to the concept of lost time gradually. Starting with small, manageable pieces of information, she began by explaining that Sarah had been injured at prom and had been unconscious for a long time. When Sarah asked how long, Dr. Foster initially said several years, hoping to ease her into the shocking truth slowly. Sarah's reaction to even this limited information was intense confusion and distress. She demanded to speak with Michael immediately, insisting that he must be worried about her missing school and their planned summer activities together. When her parents gently explained that Michael was now married with children, Sarah became agitated and accused them of lying to her. The psychological team, led by Dr. Rebecca Chen, decided that Sarah needed time to process smaller changes before confronting the full scope of her situation. They focused on helping her understand her current physical condition and the immediate challenges of recovery, while gradually introducing information about the passage of time. Carol Matthews found herself in the unique position of having to get to know her daughter all over again. The 17-year-old Sarah who had awakened was both exactly the same as the girl who had been injured in 1992 and completely different from the woman she might have become. Sarah's personality, memories, and emotional responses were frozen at the moment of her injury, creating a surreal dynamic between mother and daughter. The facility arranged for Sarah to have limited internet access under supervision, hoping to help her gradually understand how much the world had changed. Her first encounter with a smartphone left her completely bewildered. She couldn't comprehend how such a small device could contain music, photographs, and access to unlimited information. When a nurse showed her how to search for information online, Sarah spent hours looking up her former classmates, shocked to discover their adult lives and professional accomplishments. Finding Michael Chen's Facebook profile was particularly traumatic for Sarah. The photos of his wedding, his 3 children, and his successful career as an engineer made the passage of time suddenly, brutally real. She saw pictures of her former classmates at their 20th and 30th high school reunions, events that had occurred while she lay unconscious, and began to understand the magnitude of what she had lost. The discovery that her high school had been renovated, that many of her teachers had retired or died, and that the popular culture she remembered had been replaced by decades of changes she didn't understand, sent Sarah into a deep depression. She began refusing to participate in physical therapy and spent hours staring out her window, trying to process the incomprehensible reality of her situation. Dr. Chen worked closely with Sarah to help her develop coping strategies for dealing with her unique form of grief. Sarah wasn't just mourning the loss of 31 years. She was mourning the loss of the life she had expected to live, the relationships she had planned to maintain, and the future she had imagined for herself. At 17, she had believed she had unlimited time to achieve her dreams. But now she found herself in the body of a middle-aged woman with no recent life experiences to draw upon. The media attention surrounding Sarah's case intensified as more details emerged about her story. Television producers contacted the Matthews family about potential documentary projects, and publishers expressed interest in book deals. The family, still struggling to adapt to Sarah's awakening, found the constant request for interviews and personal information overwhelming and intrusive. Marcus Thompson, who had become one of Sarah's favorite caregivers, began helping her understand contemporary technology and culture. He introduced her to streaming music services, showing her how artists she had loved in high school had continued their careers or had been replaced by new musicians she had never heard of. Sarah was fascinated and disturbed by the evolution of music, fashion, and entertainment during her absent decades. Learning about world events that had occurred while she slept proved equally challenging. Sarah struggled to understand concepts like the internet, social media, terrorism, climate change, and global pandemics. The political landscape had shifted dramatically, with leaders she remembered being replaced multiple times by people she had never heard of. The technological advances seemed almost magical to someone whose last conscious memory was of a world with basic computers and no cell phones. Robert Matthews, now in his 70s, found it emotionally exhausting to watch his daughter grapple with her new reality. He had spent 31 years hoping for her awakening, but he had never fully considered how difficult the adjustment period would be for everyone involved. Sarah looked at him with the eyes of a 17-year-old. But he had aged into an elderly man while she remained frozen in time. The rehabilitation team decided that Sarah needed to visit the outside world to fully comprehend how much had changed. They arranged for a carefully supervised trip to a nearby shopping mall, hoping that seeing modern retail environments would help her understand the passage of time. Sarah was overwhelmed by the electronic displays, security cameras, and payment systems that had become standard since 1992. At a clothing store, Sarah was amazed by the casual styles that had replaced the fashion trends she remembered. The prevalence of athletic wear, the popularity of brands she had never heard of, and the integration of technology into clothing and accessories left her feeling like she had awakened on an alien planet. When a teenager offered to take Sarah's picture with a smartphone, Sarah was startled by the high-quality images and the ability to instantly share them online. The trip to the mall also exposed Sarah to the diverse, multicultural society that had evolved during her Coma years. The demographics of her hometown had shifted significantly, with immigrant families and different cultures becoming much more visible and integrated than they had been in 1992. While Sarah had always been open-minded, the extent of social change surprised her and required adjustment to her understanding of her community. Food courts, chain restaurants, and fast casual dining concepts that were common in 2023 didn't exist in Sarah's memory. She was fascinated by the variety of international cuisines available and the speed of service, but she was also overwhelmed by the choices and confused by ordering systems that relied on touchscreens and mobile apps. As Sarah's physical strength improved and her understanding of the modern world expanded, she began asking difficult questions about her future. At 48 years old chronologically, but 17 mentally and emotionally, she found herself in an impossible position. She had no career skills relevant to the current job market, no contemporary life experiences, and no peer group of people who shared her unique perspective on the world. The rehabilitation team began discussing long-term plans for Sarah's integration into society. Knowing that her case was unprecedented in medical literature, they would need to develop entirely new approaches to help someone bridge a 3-decade gap in cultural, technological, and social understanding while dealing with the psychological trauma of losing most of their expected lifetime. Finding her place in tomorrow. 6 months after her awakening, Sarah Matthews faced a decision that would have seemed impossible during her first confused days of consciousness. The rehabilitation team at Peaceful Valley believed she was ready to leave the medical facility and begin building an independent life. But Sarah felt terrified by the prospect of navigating a world that remained largely foreign to her. Dr. Foster had arranged for Sarah to live in a specialized assisted living community called New Horizons, designed specifically for people with traumatic brain injuries who needed support transitioning back into society. The facility offered independent apartments with on-site medical care, social workers, and life skills training programs. For Sarah, it represented both freedom and another reminder of how different her path had become from anything she had ever imagined. Her parents wanted her to move back into their family home, but Sarah recognized that this arrangement wouldn't be healthy for any of them. Carol and Robert had aged into their 70s while maintaining the bedroom of a 17-year-old girl, complete with boy band posters and high school memorabilia that now felt like artifacts from another lifetime. Sarah needed space to figure out who she was going to become, rather than trying to reclaim who she had been. The process of applying for disability, benefits, and navigating government assistance programs highlighted how unprepared society was for someone in Sarah's unique situation. Social workers struggled to categorize her case, as she didn't fit neatly into existing definitions of disability or rehabilitation. She had no work history as an adult, no credit rating, and no practical experience with the bureaucratic systems that governed modern life. Marcus Thompson, who had become not just Sarah's nurse but also a trusted friend, helped her practice using contemporary technology that would be essential for independent living. Simple tasks like using an ATM, operating a microwave with digital controls, or understanding cable television remote controls required patient instruction and repeated practice. Sarah often felt frustrated by her inability to intuitively understand devices that children could operate effortlessly. The media attention surrounding Sarah's story had generated both opportunities and complications. A television producer offered her a significant sum to participate in a documentary about her experience, which would provide financial security, but would also mean sharing her most private struggles with millions of viewers. Publishing companies wanted her to write a book about awakening after 3 decades. Though Sarah struggled to articulate experiences that seemed to exist outside normal human understanding, Dr. Chen continued working with Sarah on processing the complex grief she experienced daily. Sarah mourned not just the years she had lost, but also the person she might have become during those decades. She grieved for relationships that had ended before they could develop, for career opportunities she had never pursued, and for life experiences that could never be recovered. At the same time, she felt guilty for being sad about her awakening when everyone around her viewed it as a miracle. Jessica Rodriguez, Sarah's former best friend, visited regularly and became an important bridge between Sarah's past and present. Jessica patiently explained how their mutual friends' lives had unfolded over the decades, sharing photographs and stories that helped Sarah understand the natural progression of time she had missed. Jessica's own children, now teenagers themselves, were fascinated by Sarah's story and helped her understand contemporary youth culture. The question of romantic relationships proved particularly challenging for Sarah to navigate. Emotionally and mentally, she remained a 17-year-old girl with normal desires for companionship and love. But chronologically, she was a middle-aged woman whose life experiences were completely out of sync with any potential peer group. Dating websites and social interactions that were normal for people, her physical age felt completely foreign, while people who matched her emotional age seemed inappropriately young. Michael Chen made the difficult decision to visit Sarah after learning about her awakening through mutual friends. The meeting was awkward and emotional for both of them, as Michael struggled to reconcile the teenage girl he had loved with the woman she had become. Sarah was shocked by how much he had aged and by the life he had built without her, but she also felt a sense of closure in seeing that he had found happiness and fulfillment. During their conversation, Michael shared that he had kept some of her belongings from their high school years, including letters she had written him and photographs from their prom night. Seeing these artifacts from her past helped Sarah understand that her relationships and experiences from before her injury had been real and meaningful, even though they belonged to a different lifetime. As Sarah prepared to move into her apartment at New Horizons, she made a surprising decision about her possessions. Rather than trying to recreate the bedroom of her 17-year-old self, she chose to donate most of her old belongings to charity and start fresh with contemporary furnishings and decorations. This symbolic act represented her acceptance that she couldn't return to her former life and needed to create something entirely new. The New Horizons facility introduced Sarah to other residents who were rebuilding their lives after traumatic experiences, though none had stories quite like hers. She met veterans recovering from battlefield injuries, accident survivors learning to live with permanent disabilities, and stroke patients working to regain their independence. While their specific challenges were different, they shared the common experience of having their expected life paths dramatically altered by circumstances beyond their control. Sarah decided to enroll in online college courses, starting with basic computer literacy and contemporary history classes that would help her understand the world she now inhabited. The learning process was both exhilarating and exhausting, as she tried to absorb decades of information that most people had processed gradually over time. She was particularly interested in studying social changes and technological developments that had occurred during her unconscious years. Her first job was a part-time position at the New Horizons facility, helping other residents adapt to assistive technology and navigate daily challenges. Sarah discovered that her unique perspective on overcoming seemingly impossible obstacles made her particularly effective at encouraging others who were struggling with their own recovery processes. Her colleagues were amazed by her resilience and her ability to maintain optimism, despite the magnitude of her losses. On the first anniversary of her awakening, Sarah organized a celebration that brought together everyone who had supported her journey. The gathering included her parents, medical team members, friends from both her past and present, and fellow residents from New Horizons. Rather than focusing on what she had lost, Sarah chose to commemorate what she had gained: a second chance at life, deeper appreciation for human connection, and the opportunity to help others facing their own seemingly insurmountable challenges. As she looked around the room at the people who had become her new family, Sarah realized that her story wasn't really about the 31 years she had lost in a coma. It was about the courage required to build a meaningful life from unexpected circumstances, the power of human resilience, and the importance of adapting to change while maintaining hope for the future. The 17-year-old prom queen was gone forever, but the woman she was becoming had stories to tell and contributions to make that would have been impossible without her extraordinary journey through time. Sarah Matthews had awakened to a world she didn't recognize, but she was finally beginning to recognize herself within it. The future remained uncertain and sometimes frightening, but it belonged entirely to her in a way that felt both terrifying and wonderfully liberating. She had lost 3 decades, but she had gained something equally valuable: the knowledge that human beings could survive almost anything and still find reasons to celebrate being alive.